Hello everyone, my name's Joanna and today I'm going to be telling you a story. And this is a story that has been passed down from generation to generation in my family, and it is definitely paranormal. The story takes place in a small town in Mexico, particularly where my grandma still lives today, when my father was a teenager, and so were my aunts. One night, my aunt started to hear very strange sounds coming from around the house. As much as she tried to ignore it the first couple of nights, she started noticing something very peculiar. She started noticing that these sounds were getting louder and louder, and also very close to where she slept. One specific night, she woke up again because she started to hear activity happening around the house, as if someone was awake. Now keep in mind, it was at midnight. Everyone was sound asleep. There was no one awake. Yet she started hearing footsteps. Now these footsteps sounded very light, but very loud. They sounded very small, almost like a child's footsteps. She reasoned. She said, well, you know what? It might be maybe one of my nephews that slept over at the time. So she went back to sleep. A second night, the same thing started happening. And the sound became louder. And the movements sounded a lot closer. And this particular night, she decided to sit up in bed and watch. She looked all around her room. She didn't see anything. And she noticed that the sound was very close, but on the outside. So she stood up, she walked around, she got off of her bed, and in the far distance, close to the entrance of the house, there was a little silhouette of a little boy standing there. No movement, just a silhouette. My aunt runs into her bedroom, she turns on the light, and she wakes up my other aunts who also slept in the same room. And she says, is there any kid that stayed over? I just saw someone out there. Maybe they need help. Maybe they're hungry. Now, all my aunts, of course, were startled and bothered by the fact that they were awoken by my aunt. They say, no, there's no one here that's a child. It's just us. So definitely my aunt was in shock because she swore that she saw the silhouette of a little boy. She heard the footsteps. Now, all this was kept from my grandparents because they tried to reason, and my aunts were just like, well, you know what? It was probably an outside sound. Maybe you were having a nightmare. Nights progressed. These sounds were again coming up every night. One day it was footsteps, another day it was rattling in the kitchen or in the living room. But it was always these sounds followed by these footsteps. Now, one particular night, things took a twist. Again, my aunt in the middle of the night, she started to hear these noises and these footsteps, but again, they were getting closer. And this time, as soon as she sat up in bed, by the edge of her bed, she saw this little boy. Now, it was hard to see his face, but he can clearly see that it was a little boy at the edge of her bed. And he was trying to talk to her, but it sounded mumbled. She looks around to see if anybody else is awake to see this, but unfortunately, she was the only one that was awake. Now, she was scared. She couldn't scream. And even though this was very, very strange, she felt that it was a child, and somehow She didn't feel like it was something to be scared about, but she was still in shock. Now, from what she could hear, this little boy kept asking in Spanish, "Where's my mom? I want my mom." Now, the little boy kept repeating this again and again in a very mumbled way. My aunt decides to get out of bed, and she tells him, "Wait, honey, we'll go get your mom. Wait." Now, my aunt is thinking, no, there's a nephew that's here somewhere, and that's him. And what's happening right now is he probably wants to go back to one of her sisters. So my aunt decides to stand up, barely trying to keep her eyes open because this is like in the middle of the night. She walks over, she turns on the light, which was on the other side of the room. And as soon as she turns on the light, the boy is gone. There's nothing there. Now, during this time, my grandfather, as well as my uncles, were gonna rebuild the floor that was in this particular room where my aunt slept. It took several days, of course, and they took out the concrete, they dug. The paranormal activity in that house was still ongoing. One particular day, my grandfather is digging, and all of a sudden his shovel hits something within the concrete. Now, of course, he thinks, well, maybe it's more concrete that's in there, maybe it's rocks. What they found was something that was never expected. A very old wooden box. Thankfully, there was no lock in it. They opened the box, and in this particular box, there were many little boys' toys that were inside. And I'm talking about very antique toys. Toy soldiers, little rubber balls. Along with that, they found the hat of a little boy, as well as what seemed like shoes, very worn out, torn up shoes. Now, as you can imagine, my aunt, as soon as she saw this happening, she could not speak, and she knew that this was the right time to let the whole family know of what she had been experiencing. So that particular day, she blurts out and says, "I know now why this little boy has been appearing." Of course, my grandparents did not know what she was talking about. She explained what she had been experiencing throughout the nights, and it all made sense to her now. So as a family, they decide to gather these things, this little hat, these worn out shoes, this box of these very antique toys, and they take it on to a priest. They explain the happenings, and he decides to bless these things with holy water. My grandparents, as well as my father and my aunt, decides to put it on to a hollow grave that they found. They said their prayers, and they left. After this, there was no more activity from this little boy. He never appeared again. Now, the questions have always been, who was this little boy? Why were his toys and a hat and shoes there? Why was he asking for his mom? Did he get separated somehow many years ago? And he was just trying to find some guidance to guide him to where his mom was? Now, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If you are interested and you want to hear more stories, feel free to subscribe to my channel, and if you liked it, give me a like. Now, who knows, maybe in the future I will take you with me to this particular property, and maybe in the future even interview my aunts and my uncles about this story and about many more that are to come. So thank you for watching once again, and if you enjoy paranormal stories as much as I do, then please subscribe to my channel. See you later.